over. No, it's the same scope. I usually do it from the same scope, guys. So perfect. So we are live on Google Hangout. So on my interview, the person I'm interviewing today, my special guest is Randall Chase, and he's the marketing, social media, and tech director for the Texas Association of Business. And he's really staying on top of political trends and technical trends. So he is just like the perfect person to talk about this. Yeah, listen, let me put him on trivia. So, all right. So, Randall.
How's it going?
Let me see. Let me focus you. Let me focus on you. Awesome. So, Randall, if you can just give kind of a quick intro to some folks about who you are, and then we can just start with the questions that we, some of the questions that people have. And by the way, guys, if you guys have any questions, please type them in, and I'll try to get to them. So,
yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to it. Basically, I do the social media marketing technology for the Texas Association of Business, and we are the state chamber of commerce here in Texas. And basically what we do is we work with legislators, lobbyists, we work with small, large, medium-sized businesses, and we help to promote business growth, as well as political. Well, thank you for that little comment about being.
That's funny.
But we work with businesses, and we work with lobbyists and legislators to try to connect those genres together, to connect the voters to the issues, and we want to connect the lobbyists and the legislators to the voters. So we want to make sure that people know what's going on, and we want to make sure that those that are in the know are the ones that are going to be leading our country. And basically what that means is we want to make sure that the people that are in power are in tune with what we desire, and we also want to make sure that they are willing to represent our best interests.
That's awesome. And we've got a fun little fight here between Alice and Ryan. So yeah, so I think that's really interesting now that we're talking about Periscope and politics. But how do you think Periscope might impact politics? I mean, we've already seen Bernie Sanders launching his campaign on Periscope. We've seen Hillary Clinton doing certain things during the launch of her campaign. We've seen Donald Trump giving his infamous press conference, and things like that. So, what are some of the things that you see down the road as far as trends? Maybe we can start by what do you think that's going to come down?
Well, what I see is, especially with the way Periscope works, with the live streaming, with the interaction that's there, I see politicians having to step up to the plate and really engage in the issues more than just having a boilerplate or a stump speech. They have to truly know what it is they believe and hold to their guns, because what's going to end up happening is if a politician speaks upon an issue in one genre and then they get in front of another crowd and they change their stance, which we see all the time on recorded traditional media, they're going to get hammered. And unfortunately, this is not, it's not going to be any easier for them with live streaming because they're going to have to be quick on their feet, and they're going to have to truly know their issues. The other thing that they're going to have to do, just like with Donald Trump, like him, don't like him, the man, he stands on his issues, and there's a lot of people that dislike him for that. And again, not going to get into the political side of the arena there, but what you do have to understand is this is going to be a place where you've got to know your issues well. And when it comes to live streaming, you've got to have that game face on all the time, basically. The other thing I would say is you've got to make sure that you're willing to connect with your voters. You mentioned Hillary Clinton. Yes, she did.
We've got several comments coming in about that, so keep going.
There's a lot of politicians that have been on Periscope, but I don't necessarily know that many of them have done it really well yet. They look at it kind of like a mobile C-SPAN, if you will, where they're just looking at the camera, they're giving their issues, but they're not connecting with the comments on there. And I think that's going to be something that as Periscope develops and as the as the campaign continues on down the road, I think they're going to have to step out of that shell of just answering questions without answering and connecting with the comments.
And yeah, Dan Gordon has put some interesting comments about, you know, real-time politics and consistency is going to be key. And that's one of my things. I think that if politicians use this, they're only going to be able to, you know, for, you know, you can take all the time on Periscope. You're scoping constantly, eventually it's going to show. So that's one I think for So
lost you there for a second. Say again.
Yeah, and don't you think that's going to be interesting how they handle live streaming? Because you can't keep up in that. I'm a PR person, so I understand that. You can't keep up that facade for too long live streaming constantly.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. I think the fact of the matter is, live streaming, what it's going to do is it's going to make politicians have to be real. You know, they're great when they've got the proper lighting, they've got the camera placement properly done, they've got their speech writers there in front of them, they've got the teleprompter. But yeah, live streaming is going to force the politicians that are currently in office and those that are seeking office to really truly get real. I mean, you know, pardon the, you know, the political pun, we're going to get real on the out here, but really and truly, they're going to have to own up and own the issues that they're representing. And I think that exactly, Dan, no more waffling on those issues. They're really going to have to know and stick to it. And you know, when it comes to live streaming, there's a lot of trolls out there. There's a lot of people that are going to try to throw a curveball on them in the live streams. And I think that's part of what may intimidate some of the politicians out there. You know, if you watch anything like Hannity and Combs, or if you watch anything on Fox News or CNN, when they get there in those hardball issues, and the reporters or the commentators are sitting there giving them a curveball question, and you watch them kind of all of a sudden sweat the issue for a moment. Periscope and live stream, they're not going to have that opportunity to go back and get something fed into their ear that says, okay, answer it like this, or here's how you voted on this issue. They're going to have to know and be quick on their feet to be able to connect with those issues and with those questions.
Yeah, and they were making a comment of, you know, they have to be there's going to be a point where, you know, yeah, it's not filmed, this is it's you know, it's
right.
Yeah. Someone asked, how do you see it? How do you clean out with the Texas legislative session?
How do I see it with the Texas legislative profession? Is that what you asked?
Yeah, someone actually asked that on the channel.
Yeah, what we've seen so far, we have seen within, directly within the state of Texas, we're working with, I work with an organization called TP2, which is Texas Prosperity Project, and it is a specific grassroots, it's basically part of an organization called BIPAC, which is the original grassroots effort to get out the vote. They're the first organization that ever came out there that really tries to connect voters with the issues. And what we're finding is what we've noticed in the BIPAC situation is that when voters and the constituents get together, when all of us get together and we have a combined question and we're able to discuss it with the politicians, and especially in Texas, they're willing to really address the issues. And what we've seen in our state has been that politicians a lot of them have been willing to kind of come out of their shell, and they're like, you know what? Let's roll with it. Let's try something new. Let's make this happen. So far, we've had some pretty good response. Some of the older politicians, some of the ones that are a little more traditional, are a little nervous, and they're a little afraid of the lack of control. Yeah, exactly, Jason. It's because there's no real way to control it. They're afraid of that lack of control and that lack of ability to filter. But what we've seen so far, we've been able to do legislative wins reports. In other words, we've been able to go back and share and explain what some of the legislative wins have been. And that's been really good. It's been a great way to connect with an entirely new realm of voters, that millennial crowd that is not traditionally watching the news media, reading the papers, reading the articles, but they're getting their news from a different source. And so this is a way that they're able to connect with that different source. And so that's one of the really big keys, and I think that's what's going to make this particular not just this form of media effective, but I think it's also going to be what's going to really make this campaign really interesting.
Well, it's interesting. I shared an article before we went live from Pointer talking about the Periscope election, 2016 Periscope election, and how it's going to change, politicians share information, and it's also going to change how journalists cover the election. So,
right.
So you want to talk a little bit about what you see happening?
Yeah, just like that article mentioned, social media moves at a faster speed than traditional media. Always has, always will. Really funny, quick story I'll share. My wife and I were sitting in a sushi restaurant, and do you remember when the Asia Air flight crashed? Well, we're sitting there and we're just, having lunch, just chatting it up. And then all of a sudden, there's like 6 TVs all around us. All of a sudden, the TVs all breaking news, Asia Air crash. And they started showing all this. Well, then people started coming out of the kitchens. People started coming out, looking at all the information. The way they got their news, the way they got the live feeds from that were from Twitter. Those were the first areas that they got. Somebody had a camera phone and they held their smartphone and showed the crash site and began to give the information, began to feed the numbers in there. And that's where traditional media got its answers. They got that from social media. And that's what's happening here. It's a lot quicker. It might not be the best film quality, but it's a whole lot quicker on the uptake than the other ones are. Yeah, I just noticed Obama used Twitter for his campaign. He did. Obama used Twitter for his campaign, and a lot of people said that's how Obama won his campaign, was through Twitter, through social media. I definitely think that shows how the new generation of voters are really, really out there, and they're really trying to make it work for themselves.
Yeah, and Dan was asking a question of how you think the use of Periscope is going to be lobbying, like what lobbyists do.
Yeah, well, lobbyists, basically the way that's going to work is the lobbyists have the ability to connect with the politicians on issues. So when a lobbyist, and if you're not quite sure, anybody out there that doesn't know quite how a lobbyist works, basically what a lobbyist does, lobbyists have certain special interests that they're looking for in a policy or in a campaign piece. So they have, like, let's say there's the, the fruit lobbyists, and just making this up as I go. The fruit lobbyists are really looking forward to a lower cost on pesticides, and so it will reduce the cost of apples in the next season. So the fruit lobbyists lobby the politicians, and maybe there's a bill that has to do with the price of the pesticide out there. So the lobbyists have that ability. They basically go and they talk with the politicians and say, hey, here's where we are. This is what needs to be done. They're the ones that really are the bug in the ear of a lot of politicians. However, now, with this type of connectivity, I have a feeling that the voters are going to be able to have just as much of a bug in the ear. They might not be able to have as much of a pull in the pocketbook, but they'll definitely be able to have as much of a bug in the ear of these politicians as the lobbyists will, if they're able to make that connectivity with those politicians.
So yeah, Dan said exactly. I want to go back to something we were talking about the Periscope campaign. Things are going to start getting, more exciting going forward. You think that maybe a Periscope stream by a politician or someone filming a politician might cost their candidacy?
Sure. If you remember back in the Kennedy election, I think it was between, if I remember right, I believe it was between Kennedy and I'm blanking, it might have possibly been Nixon. And he just looked better on camera. And they had said from that was where he lost the election at that point, was because he looked better on camera. Granted, Kennedy was probably, it wasn't hard for him. Yeah, it was. Yeah, Nixon. Nixon just didn't look good in that particular shot. And so they say that cost him the election. He wasn't as photogenic in there. So Periscope, obviously Periscope, we're running off of, you know, an iPhone 6 or an Android cell phone camera. You're not going to have the same video quality as an HD camera is going to have, which may or may not be beneficial for some politicians.
That's a good point.
Some of us, we don't need to see that close up in an individual's face. But I think what it does is it creates a bit of realism for them. And it does have to do with whether or not the individuals look good. So I do think that that'll have something to do with the way the political campaign runs.
It'll be very interesting, I think, to see. And I want to go back to how journalists are going to cover, you know, the elections. You know, hold on, there's some questions. Yeah. How do you think it's going to, I mean, let's go back to that. We were talking about how it's real and raw and authentic, and there's only so much that can control the message. So from what do you think might happen from let's say, from a journalist perspective? I mean, what do you think might happen? Like, what do you see happening?
Well, what I see is I see things moving a little more away from traditional television. I see people not necessarily watching the Fox News or the CNN for their correspondence. I see them going straight to the news media that's going to be live on Periscope, live on these streams. I see those issues becoming much more relevant. You know, I also see, and I hate to say it this way because they might not like it, but I also see some of the correspondence not as necessary. You know, because they're going to be the ones that they're just basically holding the camera up there, and you don't necessarily need to have somebody always explaining what's going on, which is what a lot of the correspondents have done for a long time. You know, as news media evolves, it changes the way news media is done, and so you don't have to have that person standing there with a microphone necessarily. They're going to be moving straight into the live stream, and so people aren't going to be tuning into the big broadcasts, which I think I think it'll change the way traditional media is broadcast for good. I really do.
Well, it's really interesting because I remember in the last elections, the holograms. Do you remember the whole thing with the holograms and CNN? Like, it was the big thing with the holograms and everything. Yeah. So, I mean, Periscope is the real you know, you're teleporting yourself. Like, it's the real hologram.
Absolutely.
So, will there be a town meeting via Periscope in addition to regular TV ones?
Sure. Yeah, I do. You know, it's basically what Periscope ends up being is Periscope ends up being the electronic teletown hall. You know, the town hall meetings that we've seen in the past where they get everybody into a studio and they all sit there and you know, the cards are handed out and the politicians basically privy to the questions beforehand, and they go and answer the questions on traditional media. This is going to alleviate that need for sets. It's going to alleviate the need to bring the people in. They're going to have that digital town hall feel, and you're going to be sitting in your own living room connecting directly with those politicians. And I really do think that's going to change a lot of the way things happen. Now, I'll say that if the politicians really truly take the proper avenue with it, if they really are willing to make it happen, then this could be that game changer. I think some of them won't. And I think those that won't are going to see the negative effects on it because the voters will view them as maybe though they're not as authentic as some of the politicians that are really willing to make it right. You know, again, like I said, some of the politicians that are out there have used Periscope but haven't really used it well. And so I think if you're willing to get on there, just like you and I are, or any of the other, you know, like Chocolate Johnny or Ryan or any of us are sitting there willing to communicate, connect, chat back and forth with each other, I think that's really going to make it real. No need for holograms at that point.
Totally agree with you. No, this is the real hologram.
Right.
Someone was, I think it was Alice that was asking, you think that maybe Periscope and like the way the elections might be covered might affect people going to, you know, more people voting that might have not voted before? Maybe? Do you think it might have an impact?
Absolutely.
Or is it too early to talk about that?
No, I definitely think it will. I think what it's going to do is it's going to allow the millennial voters that maybe were not as willing to get out to vote. It's going to make them want to get into the process. One of the interesting statistics that came out recently through Texas Prosperity Project was that we had about 14 million registered voters. But of those 14 million, we only had a small percentage that actually went to the polls and actually got out to vote. And the answers of why they didn't get out to vote ranged from, well, I forgot, to a couple of other, they were like, well, I wasn't sure if I wanted to vote or not, because if I vote, that means I'm going to have to go work for jury duty, was actually one of the comments. And that's actually totally a misnomer. You get jury duty by filling out your driver license. But the fact of the matter is that there was the misconception. And I think what Periscope can do is Periscope can bring down those misconceptions, those walls of misunderstanding. And it's going to allow more of those millennial voters to get out there into to the campaigns. It's going to allow them to get into the process more. And honestly, I think what it's going to do is it's going to end up bringing more of them out to the polls come election day.
And I'm really excited, like one of the things I've been talking about is like, I'm really excited to see how the use is going to, increase as we get closer to the elections. And like, I could see that November day, like people just scoping, even before the TV goes live with the celebrations, at someone's camp, like people scoping from inside and having the, the scoop really of like, oh my gosh, we just totally won the election. Like I just think it's going to be really interesting to watch.
Absolutely. I think the breaking news aspect of things is going to totally be revamped. We normally had to wait for hours for the poll results to come in, and we're waiting here. And you would just sit there. Back in the day, we would all just sit there at our TVs with bated breath, waiting to hear the results of these polls. Well, okay, some of us, maybe some people didn't care that much about it, but I remember sitting waiting with bated breath, like, who won this election? Well, now with live streaming, there's bound to be an intern or somebody there who's got his phone. He's up there. They're watching for the hanging Chad, and they're going to make. They're waiting to see who's going to win this election and how quickly can we get the information out there. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be as excited as I am right now to really get to be able to break that news. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Honestly, I think it's going to. And again, I think traditional news media is going to go, dang it, a couple more times than they think, because they're going to miss those scoops unless they really get in and make it happen. So yeah, I definitely think it's going to be something new. I also think that from the traditional standpoint, when you see the victor speech, and it's always, again, nicely panned on television, you're going to have 75 to 100 people in the audience with their cameras out, and they're all going to be periscoping. So you're going to get flooded on election day and on announcement day with scopes of such and such wins, or we've done it, or here it is. And I think that's going to all come out a whole lot faster than traditional media is going to.
Yeah, I mean, even if you think about it, you could even, like with Periscope, walk with the candidate to where he goes and gives his speech. Like you're actually with him, like with him or her at that point, and just kind of walk. I think that the use of it is going to be brilliant. I actually met with one of the major dailies in the U.S. and we talked a lot about Periscope and how to use it. And I brought up the fact of the election. I think it's going to be critical. It's going to be critical. I don't think people think about how important native video is. And where's Twitter going to get all its native video? Where's Facebook going to get all the native video if it integrates with Meerkat? So it's going to be critical, I think, for what's going to happen. I mean, if we had this conversation in a year or a year and a half, I think it would be very different. We were talking about case studies. We'll be talking about candidates losing their candidacy just because of something that happened. So I'm just really excited to see what the future holds.
Absolutely. I think you're totally right on the money with that. I think that what we're going to see as it goes on, we're going to see the ability for a politician to be able to have a Periscope in the bus when they're driving from the New Hampshire primary down to the next stop. So they're going to be able to be there and answer those questions in between their stump speeches. And I think that's really going to make a huge difference and huge impact on that. And I concur with what you're saying about what the major outlets are saying. There's going to be case study upon case study, and I think this is going to change the political science realm of things. They're going to be interviewed and reviewed over and over again. People are going to be screen capturing different programs. They're going to find out what's their heart ratio of candidate A versus candidate B. How many blue hearts, did they win? How many red hearts did they get? And then I have a feeling those are going to determine, well, they got this many hearts. That must mean they're winning in the polls. So they're going to have a heart poll instead of just, the traditional straw poll. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun in that aspect. You know, there's a whole lot of new avenues that I think are going to be really great with the way social media is working. And I think you bring up a great point with the native media. You know, places like Facebook and Twitter that have the ability to record their own media, I think they're going to also become news sources themselves. You know, Periscope is not going to be the only player in this game, if you will. Anything that has the ability to live stream or has the ability to record video, I think will actually be a game changer in the process. And I you know, again, there will always be those that are still looking for traditional media until the point in time which traditional media phases itself out, which will take a long time. But there will also be the point in time, which is right now, that the new generations are going to be seeking that information. And they're not going to turn to C-SPAN. They're not going to turn to some of the more traditional forms of media. And this will be that game changer for them.
I'm loving this. I'm loving the scope. I think lots of people in here are writing that they're really enjoying it, guys. And I wish, you know, one of the things I really wish that we could have on Periscope, Meerkat has the cameo feature where you can actually have someone jump in. And I actually saw someone interview, my friend Krishna did an interview this morning on Meerkat using the cameo feature. So I totally wish I had that because it would have been so much more interactive. But, you know, I just think that the way we're going, the way things are going, it's just going to be really interesting to watch. I think from a journalist, as a former journalist, I think it's going to change the way people cover the news. So yeah, I mean, lots of guys, if you guys have any questions, please, you know, please jump in and write, you know, and write things in. You know, I think we're going to see a lot more use of Periscope. You know what, I saw, for example, Jeb Bush, he chose Snapchat, let's say, to launch his campaign. And Snapchat's a really very different, it's a different platform. So what do you think? Do you think it's going to be like lots of people using Snapchat as well as Periscope from a social media perspective now?
You know, honestly, I was really surprised to see him use Snapchat as his venue of choice. I really was. Do I think he was wrong? No, I honestly think he did a great job because he hit a new market there. But it was not, honestly, what I would have considered to be the first place for a political candidate release, which is, I think, exactly why he did it. You know, because it's nobody else was thinking Snapchat, and I think there's a total demographic there within Snapchat that is not, again, not watching traditional media, and so I think that was really a great opportunity for him. I think, though, as we go on, and yeah, Jeb was going for the youth vote. He absolutely is. Jeb's looking for that vote. That Snackjar's right there. He's looking for that level of voter who has not been jaded yet by the politicians that are out there. You know, they're putting on a fresh face, and when they do that through these new forms of media, they're connecting first with voters on a level before they get sidetracked by the other people that are out there. And what I think is going to be interesting as it continues on, I think those that do grab hold of social media, whatever format it's going to be, I think they're going to see a definite upswing in the polls. I have to think they're going to, because it just is that connection piece. You know, if you look at the demographic research of where Facebook stands, it's not just kids on Facebook anymore. It's grandmas, grandpas, moms, and dads. You know, the traditional demographic of Facebook is moms and grandmas. That's the standard tradition. It's the female voter range right there, the higher income voter range. That's where you're going to see in Facebook. And so Twitter has a similar. Twitter's right there in that 18 to 21 to 25-year-old demographic, and they are connecting right there with those. Yeah, the baby boomers and the Gen Xers and the millennials are all interconnected within these formats, and I really think that the ability of politicians to connect on there is going to really make an impact on them. And it's in your face, you know. You have to turn on the television. You've got to turn on CNN or the radio. You've got to open up or go buy a newspaper to get the information there. You're already checking your Facebook status. You're already jumping on Twitter. So those that are out there are already going to be in your feed, whether you like it or not. And so that's the ability for them to jump into the middle of that conversation without you even asking them to be there. They're there. And so I think those that do it well are really going to make they're going to make an impact in the polls.
Definitely. And I think one thing, by the way, Dan was asking, I think it was Dan or Dave, what has been the most innovative use of Periscope you've seen by a politician so far? I mean, I can tell you I haven't really seen, they have not engaged. So to me, nothing has really been innovative. But what are your thoughts?
Well, if we're going on what's happened so far, just using it.
Just using it, right?
I mean, just opening it up. At Six Chases, who's beautiful, by the way. That's my wife, Hillary. The fact that she was willing to get on Periscope, and people are dogging her because they said, well, she didn't interact. Yeah, but at least she was there. That's more than can be said for others that are out there. So I think as long as politicians continue to utilize those media outlets, they're going to see the impact. They're going to see the positive impact on it. I watched Ted Cruz at a town hall where he had his cameraman or whoever it was that was filming it was back there, and he was talking to the crowd. One of the greatest things that I noticed on his was he didn't have a teleprompter. He was in a pair of khakis and a blue blazer, and he's talking to all the old folks in the crowd, because it really was. I mean, it was an old folks crowd in the middle of a barn. But the fact of the matter was, I wasn't in that barn. And the 500 or so other people that were watching this weren't sitting in that barn. So what that means is he got his message out to a whole group of people who weren't sitting in the middle of that barn with a bunch of old folks. And so with him doing that, he was able to spread that message out, even if he didn't directly interact with the people on the scope. He did get his message out, and I appreciated him for it. The question I get a lot is who's using it better, and hopefully I'm not jumping ahead. And I'll be honest, so far what I've seen is that the Republicans have actually been using it better, I think, than the Democrats have so far. That may change, who knows? But right now, I've seen the Republicans have been actually using it a little bit better than the Democrats, which is fun. I think that's going to be something too, to be able to judge the candidates, who's using it better, who does it better, Republicans or Democrats. But like the GOP has their own Periscope, they've got their own one, so you can go watch some of the comments and things that are coming out. And there's other groups that are out there. Jeb Bush is on there. We saw Jindal on there. And, so there's been a number of them that I've been really kind of impressed that are jumping on there. Cruz is on there. So again, I think as long as they're using it, it's going to be useful.
Mm-hmm. And I definitely think it's, one of the things I've asked in one of my scopes, and before you answer this, I want the people that are watching to write yes or no. Would you want candidates to get their message across on Periscope themselves, or would you be okay? This is the question. Would you be okay with influencers doing some marketing for politicians on Periscope? Would you be okay with that? So I want to see what people write. Would you be okay with influencers spreading their, using Periscope to spread political messages for candidates? So can you guys write yes or no? Yes, themselves more authentic. No, no. Okay, so lots of no's, a little bit of everything. Hey, Dr. Cindy Brown, thanks for jumping in. Yeah, okay, but not paid influencers. That's interesting, Dave. That's interesting. So, because, Randall, one of the things that influencers can kind of busy. Okay, yeah, politically qualified influencers. That's interesting, Alice, that you say that. Because one of the things that, I think we always see at some point during the political campaign are stars, celebrities, let's say, celebrities aligning themselves with a certain candidate and talking about a certain candidate. So how is that gonna play out on Periscope? What do you think is gonna happen? Are they gonna do, because Periscope is the ultimate storytelling platform, and it's also brilliant for influencer marketing. But how do you see, Randall, in your perspective, it playing out with politicians and celebrities or influencers aligning themselves and sharing the message?
I think that's a great question. Honestly, that's a really good question. It's a really good perspective to look at. I think that both of them will end up being necessary. I think that you're going to have the politician on there, but and I think that having um, just like Alice said, a qualified influencer, a qualified individual sharing that information, it's no different than a press secretary, and I think that while some people may not like it, I think we're going to have both of them happening, because if a politician is on stage and he's sharing and he's talking, then we're going to have somebody else there that's going to be able to answer the questions that are happening from the crowd. And I think that we've got to make sure that those that are there are unbiased. I mean, as unbiased as you can be in politics, considering politics is completely biased. But I think that what you're going to see is as long as they're willing to, the politicians themselves are willing to get in front of the camera themselves and actually make those statements themselves, I think we're going to be able to see a good flow. Because if they're just using another individual or an outside influencer, then I think what's going to end up happening is they're going to come across as not being genuine. But I think if they're able to use a good integration of both, then I have a feeling that it will not only help them to come across as genuine, but it will also help them to come across as having a wider spread, if you will, of information and information givers. But just like a commercial, or just like you remember product placement, people don't want to be sold to, so they want something authentic, and so that's going to be the difficult piece, is making sure that authenticity comes across.
That's interesting. So it's interesting is actually they have a retention for that. As long as it's not paid, as long as someone that really feels strongly about this and wants to support them, it'll be, it'll be authentic, real. We got a really good question from Snack Jar, and one of the things that being that I am a Costa Rican American, I do look a lot at the rest of the world and emerging markets, especially because that's kind of where I play a lot. And one of the questions that we asked is, how do you think Periscope might impact politics elsewhere? One of the things I've written about before is the fact that, for example, in a country like Venezuela, where there is limited, limited liberty of freedom of speech, there's lots of things going on internally. I could see this as a tool for change and a tool for, an aspiring opposition leader to actually maybe get their message across. So have you given any thought to how Periscope or live streaming might be a tool for politics abroad, for politics outside the US?
Yeah, it's honestly going to make things very interesting for a couple of reasons. One is Periscope and some of these live stream apps are not available in other countries. And so you've got to have, it's going to be one of those things where, is it even available within the country to begin with? But you're exactly right. Some of these political realms have been, run in dynasties type, where they've had people there for such a hugely long time, that some young buck can come up and make an impact with the voters in these other countries, and I have a feeling that this will change a lot of the way politics in other countries are run. Not only that, just like one of the articles that you had brought up a while ago, or one of the Scope News, where they periscoped off the balcony, and got to see the realistic life that was happening in that country. And
North Korea. It was North Korea. It was yeah. Which was amazing, just to be able to see that in real time.
Exactly. So if you're in a country where the political leader has put on this facade, not only for himself but for his country, and then all of a sudden this live streamer is going to be able to, this new politician is going to be able to talk about his stances and his positions, and then turn the camera around and show, and this is what I'm talking about, and scan the poverty and the corruption in some of these places. I think that's really going to change the playing field, not only for those countries, but for the world's view of what's happening in some of these places. Because, a lot of these places, just like we have traditional media here, there's a very controlled media outlets in these countries. And I think this is going to make a huge impact in that fashion.
Well, it's interesting because Tim was saying in here, there's no Periscope in China. When I was in Vietnam and I was giving my talk in front of entrepreneurs and students, I was talking a lot about Twitter, And then someone stopped me, and it was a full reality check for me. And I was like, they were like, you know what? Twitter's regulated here. Like, we really spend our time on Facebook. And I was like, I knew that, but I didn't understand. Like, I guess having living in this country and not having that restriction, it doesn't hit you till you're actually there. And you're like, oh my gosh, that is so true. So I think that, and there's going to be ways around it,
Right.
and there's going to be different apps. I think that, yeah, we've got Periscope and Meerkat, and there's Nomadcast, and then there's in-person. Like, there's all these things popping up, but, people are going to find a way around it, especially. So liberate world media.
Absolutely.
It's going to be a game changer, guys. And I can see it, from a Latin American perspective. Unfiltered personal broadcasting equals geography will no longer be a barrier to communication. Very true. And I wonder to see like what's going to happen in like emerging markets like India or in China, especially in China with WeChat. I believe they use Weibo or WeChat, how they might be able to use this, to change the political course of their countries.
I think so too. I'm going to be very intrigued by it because, all forms of media, anything that's new out there is going to be a game changer. Way back in the day when the only way we got our news media and information was when you went to the movie theater, back in, and then you had to watch the newsreel. Here we are, live newsreel here, and that was the only way that folks got their news media because they didn't have televisions in homes. That, and then when televisions came in the home and they had the nightly news, that was a huge game changer. When Ted Koppel was there giving us information from the news desk right there, when Walter Cronkite, came on live and shared John F. Kennedy has been shot, John F. Kennedy has been killed. Those were life-changing, game-changing moments in politics and in life in general. And so each one of these evolutions of media has changed the way we as consumers have bought products. It's changed the way we as voters have voted. It's changed the way we as parents have parented our children. It's all a game changer in every aspect. And so I really think that with live stream, it's going to have a massive impact and a massive effect on not only the political realm, but it's also on the what items are going to be voted for once a politician gets in office. Because once it becomes live, who's to stop a politician from live streaming his own stream from the House floor? And to hear these politicians that are sharing stuff, while granted it might be on C-SPAN and 90% of the general population misses what's actually in this bill. If Ron Paul is on the floor, and he's out there scoping from the mic, people are going to see it and go, hey, wait a minute, I didn't know that was an amendment to this bill. You're really going to add that onto this bill about transportation? And this is something that has to do with, farming and agriculture? Wait a minute, time out. And
wait a second, what was going on? Like, how did I not know this, right? It's going to be like, yeah, definitely. Wake up call.
I always find it amazingly intriguing that in traditional media, I call it the distraction effect or the magician effect. I always find it when something pertinent is about to go down in politics, there's this sudden upswing in random useless news media that seems to be captivating the traditional newsreels. And I find that really interesting that we've got some piece of legislation that's going to be snuck in under the wire, and all of a sudden we're sitting there and the news media is talking about the size of Kim Kardashian's rear end. These distraction pieces, I think, are really going to begin to be less and less for the discerning aficionado of politics. That's really going to be looking and saying, "Oh, hey, wait a minute, this is what's going on, and I'm missing out on this because I'm not educating myself." Well, I think that barrier, if you will, that curtain's going to be lifted and drawn out, and we're really going to see the Oz behind the curtain. Great and powerful Oz is all of a sudden going to be open, and we're going to see, hey, wait a minute, he's not as great and powerful as we thought he was, and what's he doing with my tax dollars? And so I think that's going to be something that we're really going to be able to see firsthand. And then when that happens, then you as a constituent, as a voter, get to pick up the phone and go, hey, wait a minute, Representative so-and-so, I don't want that to happen. And that's where that's where the responsibility then comes back onto us as the individuals who voted those people into office. It's our responsibility to, at that point, make our desires known. Once we vote him in office, that's not over. That's just the beginning. So we've got to make sure that we're taking responsibility at that point to go, okay, you know what? I don't like what's happening here, and I want it to change. So I think those scopers are going to stand on Capitol Hill. They're going to scope live when the Supreme Court's about to make a decision. They're going to be inundating the Twitter feeds of these politicians. And let me tell you right now, that's one of the things that we do is if there's a position or a bill that's about to come up, you better believe that we're sitting there tweeting at so-and-so, at Representative such and such. I don't like this bill, and here's why. Hit tweet and, you know, and send it out. And believe it or not, we have seen a lot of bills that were about to be passed that changed. Give you a really quick one. We had a bill that was actually on the books here. It was being voted on here in Texas. That was a very volatile bill, and we said, you know what, time out. We don't like that, and we contacted him. We called him, and then we began to tweet him. And when that happened, he actually went in and pulled his own bill out and said, you know what, if these guys are saying we don't like it, I'm not going to do it. Huge. It was huge. And so I think again, it's going to be something that's really going to impact the political realm, and it's going to impact what happens after the fact.
Yeah. So lots of great commentary here, and you know, it'll be very interesting. And like you're saying, like wouldn't it be awesome if during that moment when the person's like doing the phone call to the politician and actually gets them on the line, if they're scoping, you know, depending on what kind of state it is, because you can't be recorded, whatever, but it would be really interesting. It makes it, you know, makes it real. It's like,
absolutely, yeah. I think it could be hilarious in some aspects, but I think it's going to be really, really intriguing to see them willing to do that. Here's a ball play with an approach of being served media. Yeah, I think you're right, Anna. You know, we're tired of the traditional being fed the media. We're tired of being fed what they want us to know. This is going to be a door opening, and that, just like I said, it's going to be the curtain coming back where we're actually going to be able to see what's happening. And I really think it's going to be huge. It's going to be something that I think that a lot of people are going to be very intrigued by when it comes down to it.
Is there anything else that I haven't asked that you want to talk about that, you know, I might have not thought of?
You know, one of the things that brings me back was, you remember Joe the plumber? When he kept getting brought up, you know, well, Joe the plumber, and it was just this repeated Joe the plumber, and then all of a sudden we saw this Joe the plumber. Periscope is going to become that Joe the plumber is actually going to be out there scoping. And I think that instead of it being a story where, you know, we always hear politicians say, I was talking to Sally McGuthrie, owner of Sally's Salon in Yuma, Arizona, and Sally and I were having this discussion about healthcare situations, and Sally was really blah, 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 blah. You know, and I kind of think half of these people, they make them up as they go. And what I have a feeling is going to happen is when, you know, this politician is supposedly talking to Sally at the salon, someone's actually going to be out there and just want to watch Joe Biden's uncensored scope.
He would be awesome on scope.
I think so.
From a PR perspective, it's like the worst nightmare, but he would be awesome on scope.
That's going to be the fun thing. I think it's going to be hysterical to see. Some of these politicians are their own SNL skit. You know, and so I'm going to
quote you. That was a brilliant quote. I love it.
You know, but I think that's going to be part of it. I'm going to crack up. I want to see who the first politician that brings a selfie stick down to the floors of the House is going to be. You know, and he's just scoping it live. I really think it's going to be a whole lot of fun. Unintentional political comedy. Yeah. You know, that the bottom line is this: we're living in an era right now of absolute game changing. We're living right now seeing politics become real on a level like we've never seen it before. And we're seeing an openness, I think, in the political realm that it's got to make some impact. It just has to, because if we're not able to make an impact at this juncture with this much connectivity, then we're lost. And, you know, again, the bottom line is this. It's the voters who put the politicians in office. It's their responsibility to stay connected. It's our responsibility once an individual gets into the office to remember, I put you there. and you need to stand behind what you said you were going to do. And I'm going to ride you until you do what you're supposed to do. I'll call you, I'll tweet you, and you know, that's going to really have to be where we take our steps. You know, one of the things we're talking about was the XM Bank that just came up for reauthorization. And when you went to the site, it was when it was talking about contacting your politician, it used to say write a letter to your politician, and then it added make a phone call to your politician's office. Now it says contact them by tweet, call them. Those are the two big buttons now. It's no longer write your politician because it takes too long. But
it takes
now,
too long, and yeah, it's like
yeah. So, but they want to hear from you. Believe it or not, they want to hear from you. And if you're willing to get out there and move, then you're going to make that impact. I really think it's going to be amazingly interesting this upcoming election, and I think it's going to be a game changer in the global political realm.
And we're getting some great comments about being a very scope. Like, guys, usually when I do my scope reviews with Randall, you've been on them. Like, we get into really interesting, you know, discussions. So thanks, guys. So Doug just jumped in and he was saying that, you know, he's skeptical of politicians being on Periscope, wanting to be on Periscope because they can't, you know, control the message. And the reality, from a PR perspective, I can tell you, sometimes it's impossible because a PR crisis will happen at the speed of someone's mouth.
Absolutely.
You know, I've had to go through those, okay, FYI. So I've had to face a couple of PR crises. Not I didn't do them myself, but from a PR perspective. And that's the reality of how it happens. What happens on Periscope, and I say this all the time, what happens on Periscope does not stay on Periscope, people. Don't fool yourselves.
No, you're absolutely right. You know, it's going to be, for some, the Joe Bidens of the world, it's a PR nightmare. It really is. You know, those that have a difficulty controlling what they say, it's going to be a PR nightmare. Some of them will be better off not scoping. You know, we see some of these gaffes that happen every year in front of the standard traditional news media, and some of them, I mean, they make YouTube reels all over the place, and they're going to get auto-tuned. You know, you name it, it's going to happen. You know, but I hope that it will be the politicians' willingness to be real that will connect them to the voters, and I hope that they're willing to step out. And again, what it's going to require of them, it's going to require them to pause and really think about what they're doing and to know what they're voting on. I think they'll task staffers with to ensuring control. Yeah, I think so. You know, Frameable Faces, I think you're right. They're gonna task those staffers to and you know, some of the comments that we've had, okay, well, how do we fix this? Well, we're gonna get all of our people to get into the scope at one time. We're gonna have 150 people that are all gonna get in there, and we're gonna fill it up and block it to make it a full broadcast, and then we're gonna feed those questions that we want to answer. You know, and so there's ways that I think some politicians may try to make it happen. But the fact of the matter is, they've got to be willing to answer for their views. They've got to be willing to respond to genuine criticism, and they've got to be able to be quick on their feet to be able to read the comments, because honestly, that's difficult. You know, when you've got a thought process going, and we've all been there. If you've been on Scope, you've watched somebody who's trying to get something out, and there's like 55 comments scrolling up there, and it's there and gone in 10 seconds. And I think what they're going to have somebody do is somebody may have to be there to read the comments, take them down, and then give them to them later on and say, this comment was brought to you by such and such. And then they can respond there in that situation. I think that's honestly going to be one of the more realistic ways, because if a politician's right in the middle of explaining his perspective on a bill and somebody else brings up another comment, he can't just stop mid-sentence and move on to that other comment, because they've got to be able to explain the entire process. And that's honestly, for what it's worth, that's going to be a difficult feature, if you will, of the way Periscope works, because it is so fast-paced, it is so kind of, you know, bouncing around, that a politician has to not only be on their game, but they have to also be able to create and complete a whole thought in a very short amount of time.
That's a really good point as to how fast, you know, because people want to be heard. Like people want to be heard, and they want their opinions or their questions answered. One of the things, it's really interesting. You're talking about that idea of making 100, like having 150 staffers jump in, only feeding the right questions. Is my, we all know that.
I probably just gave a politician an idea to do that.
No, but there are people that can hack this. There are people that get in there, and there's a troll that really wants to get into someone's scope. They will get in that scope. So, I'm very curious to see how they're going to handle the trolls, because it's funny, whenever I do a political one, and I'm surprised no one has jumped in here, but whenever I don't do political ones, when I do like things that we talk about politics in general, I usually get a troll in there talking, about this candidate or this candidate, and we haven't really got that much on the scope, which I'm surprised. But I'm wondering, it's going to be interesting to see how the politicians that do jump on Periscope and do try to be authentic, how they handle the trolls. That would be an interesting thing to see. Don't you think, Randall?
Absolutely, I do. I think that the ability to control trolls is something that you're going to expect it. You're going to know it's going to be there. You've got to know, as a politician, the fine line between a genuine question and a troll. And I think that what's going to end up happening, I think that's going to be a difficult perspective. I think there's going to be a lot of politicians that are going to think somebody's question is a troll question. And again, you think about it. You've got Republicans, you got Democrats, and you got Tea Party. We'll just use those three as a piece, because there's a gajillion other subcategories of parties. If a Republican's sitting there talking about a bill and an issue, and a Democrat comes in there who completely has the opposite perspective on this bill or issue, he could be considered a troll if he's asking a question that counters what that Republican's perspective or view is, and vice versa. So what the politicians are going to have to do is determine, how do I answer this question in a concise way, and how do I respond without coming across as short or condescending to somebody who I may not agree with their view or their on their position, and how do I know when not to answer somebody? And that's going to be a difficult way to handle it. In traditional town halls or in traditional meetings, the people that make it to the mic usually they ask the question to somebody else first and foremost, and then
they're vetted before. It doesn't mean necessarily that they're going to do what they say they're going to do, but
right, yeah. I don't know if you watched the other day. Obama was in the White House, and he was giving a discussion about I believe it was immigration, and there. Well, no, it was about. It was during the transgender issues, and somebody in the crowd started heckling him from the audience, and it took almost 3 to 5 minutes for them to get this person out of the audience. So trolls can make it in the White House, and he at the end there was a phone call and there was a board meeting of, how in the world did that person get this close to me? How in the world did this person get in the White House? And so they've got to be willing to understand. In his response, some people liked it, some people didn't. But he stopped him, and he goes, "I'm going to give you one more chance to stop. You're in my house." And I think some people were offended that he called it my house, because it's the people's house. But the fact of the matter is, he was in there, and he kind of handled it pretty well. And he goes like, "All right, I'll wait." And he waited until that person left. Now with Periscope, if you see a troll, you just boom, hit a button, and you can block them. But the fact is, you got to be mindful of, is their issue valid? Is this the appropriate place for their issue? And I don't want to say, are they worth being heard? Because everybody says, well, everybody's worth being heard. But the fact of the matter is, you've got to find out, is this something that's going to further the conversation? If it's furthering the conversation, then I say go with it. Let them ask the question, and then respond to it. If it's a detractor or a sidetrack from the typical conversation, then I have a feeling that a lot of politicians are going to have to they're going to have to work through the weeds to figure out which is which. And I think that's going to take a whole nother realm of political training for these politicians to understand how it works. We are doing
very interesting. I mean, I'm very curious as to what the political advice, social media advisors that they have are going to think of when they're using Periscope. Like, I'm just looking forward to seeing what happens.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the things that we're working on with TP2, we're actually putting together a class, or it's a school. It's a candidate school, and it's nonpartisan. Anybody, Republican, Democrat, anybody's welcome to come be a part of it. If you're basically what it is if you're interested in working in politics, here's some things to keep in mind. This is what it's going to do to your family. This is how it's going to impact your finances. This is how it's going to impact your time. Are you really willing to give up your freedoms to do this? And I honestly think it's going to weed out a lot of people. And one of the areas that's I think is now going to have to be brought up in there is, are you willing or able to be on social media, and what is that going to do to you and your persona? How quick on your feet are you going to be? And I think that's going to be a game changer for some as well.
Well, yeah, it's so dynamic compared to any previous media. That's what Rebecca was saying. So yeah, we'll have to see. And I mean, I want to have this conversation with you in 6 months, and I want to have it in a year. And, you know, I just think it's going to change and evolve as we go. So guys, if you guys on Periscope, if there's any questions we didn't get to, feel free to type them in because we're going to start wrapping up. So, it was not funny as a president. Strategery. Yeah, strategery.
It is fun. You know, I love to see, yeah, you know, that's part of it is the personality, because most of us only see a politician when he's on a stage reading a speech. We have a hard time seeing personality in that. Again, like him, don't like him. I think Obama did a great job at unveiling some personality traits. You know, there were so many times where, you know, I love the Saturday Night Live skit where he's walking there and like, drop the mic, you know. But there were times where he did. I mean, you know, he was able to come out there and something might have been said, and he was like, well, now wait a minute, and you know, gave some realism. And I think that's something that we might be able to see with and I hope we'll be able to see with things like Periscope. You know, when a politician is on the tour bus going from one stop to the next, he might be able to get on there and just chat, you know, just have fun, just spitball it with the candidates out there, you know.
It's interesting to bring that up, because I remember the documentary Journeys with George. Did you ever see the documentary Journeys with George?
No, I didn't.
No, it was a documentary about it was Nancy Pelosi's daughter, who actually was on the campaign trail with George W. Bush, and it was a really fun documentary. You know, very interesting to watch. So now that you're talking about that, it's so true. It's like bringing this other side of who they are.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think there's, you know, if they do it well, if a politician does it well, you know, I kind of think like, you know how Brian Fanzo, he'll Periscope on the backside when he's recording a podcast, you know, and he'll have his meerkat here, and he'll have his Periscope here, and he'll have his podcast over here. And I think if politicians do it right, you'll be able to have that kind of behind the scenes aspect of it. And I think that really will give a realism to not only the candidate, but it'll give a realism to our connectivity as a country to politics in general. I think it will help it be more real to us, you know, if we can see them in that fashion. You know, I think it's become, we as voters have become so jaded and glassed off to it, because all we see is this politician up on a stage, but you know, in a suit behind a podium. Once you move that podium out and they become real to you in real time, I think that really has the ability to connect us to the issues and make us more willing to be a part of the process. You know what I mean? I think, at least I hope that that's going to be something that the individuals are willing to do.
All right, I think we're going to wrap it up. Maybe the 3 takeaways you want people to think about when it comes to how Periscope might impact politics.
Yeah, you know, my biggest takeaways on this are it's our responsibility to get involved. It's our responsibility to share the issues and connect with those politicians. If you see a politician that's out there and he's using Periscope, sign on. Go for it. Share it with your followers and be connected. Be that voice that's going to be on there. Because here's the thing. Many of them, if they aren't able to answer the question right there, they probably will have someone, if not a staffer, go back and watch the replay. And you'll still hopefully be able to get your voice out there and get your voice heard. The next thing is, I would say, is use this stream, use this social media role as your open window. In other words, absorb it as it comes in, and encourage other people to do it as well. And if you have a connection or a voice out there in the political realm, make it known. Stand on your issues. And to the politicians, I would say, it's time to drop the veil. It's time to be willing to be real with your voters. And I'm speaking right here to you guys, all the politicians that are out there. Let's open up the floodgates. Let's be honest with ourselves. Be honest with your constituents. Be honest with the issues, and connect. If you can do that, I'm telling you right now, you're going to win. You may not win the election because you may be honest with your voters, but you're gonna win the authenticity. You'll at least get miscongeniality. So but the fact of the matter is, when you're willing to be real, you're going to give an authenticity to the process, and that is really something that needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, and thanks so much, Randall. We're getting some amazing comments. Everyone's, I think it's grateful of you that said great scope. They don't like politics, so this is awesome. Great.
Well, I'm glad.
Kudos to you for being just such an amazing guest. So political scoping. Yeah, thanks, guys. I really, really appreciate everyone that jumped in. I'm going to put the camera on me for a second before I say bye to you, Randall. Second, guys, thank you so much for jumping in. Sunday nights have become such a fun time for great discussions. I try to create content. So I'm going to turn it over to Randall so we can say goodbye, and I can say thank you. So Randall, thank you so much for being my guest tonight.
Absolutely.
Lots of great, guys. And guys, Randall Chase is in there. Feel free to follow him. He is amazing. I can see you, Randall, being like the Periscope correspondent for for a brand, like for like a major, for CNN or whatever. Like, you were just really amazing. We had such a good time, guys. Such a good time.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It was a whole lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Thank you guys that were in here. Your questions were phenomenal. Love them. And just again, get involved. Get connected. Anybody can do this. Anybody can be involved. And it levels the playing field. That's the coolest part about this. This allows anybody to be to get their voice out there. It truly does level that playing field.
Yeah. Thank you, Randall. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And guys, Randall, if you can jump in the scope before, I'm going to shut the Google Hangout out, but if you can jump in the scope so people can follow you, that would be great.